In our virtual green room right now, Joe Huebscher joins us. He's written a book called Agape, the Love of God. What's so interesting about Joe, we had a conversation off the air, is his early beginnings and then some of what he was able to do and some of the places that he taught. Places on my list, frankly, to go to, like Malaysia, Singapore, Indonesia, India. But let's start at the beginning. Joe, thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're welcome.
Let's talk about the beginnings of your life. You grew up in a really, really big family. Describe what that was like, because I know you told me your dad escaped poverty in Switzerland, right?
Yes. I arrived on planet Earth in northern Wisconsin, up where it was too cold for people to live. But we survived.
Northern Wisconsin. And in Wisconsin, the reason he went there is because of the land. How cheap was the land?
Well, he always had the mind that you had to have land in order to have any kind of wealth. So he worked out in the western farms for some time till he got some money to go to Wisconsin, and he was able to get 200 acres at $1 an acre.
Wow, $1 an acre. People are listening to that, Joe, and they can't believe it. $1 an acre a long time ago. So that was great for him because married and then having children when he got married, and 12 children, and you were number 11. So there was a lot for people to do, though, with a family that big on the land, right? What did you do on the land as a kid?
Well, the one word describes it all. It's spelled W-O-R-K, work.
Oh, that's a foreign concept to so many people. You worked.
we raised the garden, all of our own food, mostly. I didn't do much, but my older brothers had guns, and they did some shooting for our meat. And we had meat, venison, 12 months out of the year, either frozen or canned, or fresh if it was in the fall. And so with meat and what the garden produced, all you had to buy was mostly flour and sugar.
Yeah, and then you were set. So you're raised this way, like you said, to work, to have to, eat what you can grow and et cetera. And then you go off, and when you finish schooling and you start to teach in a Bible college, and of course, I mentioned the title of the book, Agape, the Love of God. Tell us about the book.
Well, the subject got me interested. Shortly after I came to know the Lord, when I found out that the greatest command was to love God. Well, how in the world can you command yourself to love? To me, it was completely foreign. And so it was always my interest of how do you fulfill this? And I got interested enough that when I finally finished seminary and I had to write a thesis, I suggested that as a subject and was frankly turned down by the faculty that says, hey, everything's been written on that subject. So I had to write a paper to them to show them that hardly anything had been written in any kind of a academic level. And then they agreed that I could write my thesis. So that's got me on the way anyway.
Right, I love that. Yeah.
So
writing and putting it together. So you put the thesis together, and now here we fast forward all these years later, and your book is a living, breathing thing on the Amazon platform and other places. What do you hope people get out of reading your book?
Well, I am convinced that there is no good English word to translate the word agape into English. And people don't really understand it. They read the word love and they think of all the emotional kind of love, friendship, good, and have no idea what it really involves. And John, the Apostle John, in 1 John says that God is agape. And that puts it pretty strong and important place in our life. We better know what it is. And so my book, though it's fairly small, is designed to show people what agape really is, why it isn't this nice, warm, emotional feeling.
And you flesh that out in the book. To you, if you had to give me just a short answer, what would you tell me it is?
Well, I give a definition for agape as giving yourself to another for their good. And that has to do with giving yourself. And unless you give yourself to God, you can't do it. You got to give yourself to God first. And then you can. And then with that in mind, I found out that when Jesus asked Peter, "Do you have agape for me?" Peter changed the word to philia, the other word, a nice, warm, emotional kind of love. And I'm convinced Peter didn't know what agape was.
Ah, there you go. And that is at the heart of the book. Exactly. I love it. And again, it's Agape, the Love of God. Joe Huebscher is our guest, and you can pick up his book on Amazon. So I mentioned also the places that you taught, because this has been your life. You've lived all over the place, including overseas, Malaysia and Singapore. I said Indonesia and India. Did you have a favorite place where you taught?
My favorite place changed pretty regularly to whoever I was teaching.
Ah.
Otherwise, the environment, no. Just whoever would listen and was interested in what I had to teach.
Yeah, and you taught for a long time. How long did you teach?
Well, you mean how many years? Or
yeah, how many years?
Well, I started teaching, well, if you go way back, I was in high school when I was teaching a Sunday school class.
Wow.
But when I finished my college seminary degree, 1968, I began teaching the same year at Maranatha Baptist Bible College. I taught there for 8 years. And then one day, God spoke to me, just a very not visible, but very clearly. And he said, Joe, you are all through here. And it didn't bother me a bit, even though I had a wife and 3 little babies by then. Because I realized God was directing my life and he'd take me to the next place. And basically that was Chattanooga, Tennessee, the seminary at Tennessee Temple. And I taught there till 1991. And then I wondered, now what am I going to do? Well, I didn't have to wait long. God just changes has a place already for you. And led along, and I get a letter. And the letter invited me over to Singapore to teach for a while.
And then that's how you ended up in Singapore and all those adventures in all those other countries I mentioned. So interesting. Joe, thank you so much for joining us on the show.
Well, you are welcome.